And if I wanted to say I am going to plant
Mm-hmm.
okra and baigan.
Yeah, so you can say we know okra is bhindi, and we know baigan is just baigan. So everybody, that's a free word. Everybody knows that. So if you want to say I am going, that's hum jaila. I am going to plant okra and baigan. Hum jaila bhindi, baigan rope. Hum jaila bhindi, baigan rope. I'm going to plant okra and eggplant.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Trinidad Bhojpuri Words and Phrase. So we had our Kaise Bole Hindustani Mein feature. So how do you say seed in Hindustani? We also had the words ROPAY, Trinidad Bhojpuri phrase HUMKE BHOOK LAGAT ba. We also had JHONKAAWAY and a food-related word KUSUMAY. So let's go get Vinay of the Cutlass magazine.
So this is the sari.
Right, they're doing it like this, right? They're mashing it up so.
And Karan Das.
Yeah, I'm Vinay Harrichan from the Cutlass magazine.
Okay, Vinay. So we had another terrific week of Trinidad Bhojpuri words and phrase. And now we have a new feature, which is Kaise Bole Hindustani Mein. How do you say in Hindustani? So basically, we put an English word, and really it's a way for us to track the use of the Hindustani version. So you might know the meaning of this, or you might know the Bhojpuri, the Trinidad Bhojpuri, the Hindustani word for it. If you're here in Trinidad, maybe you're in Suriname, you might have a different word. If you're in Fiji, you might have a different word. And so this is a wonderful way for us to expand the vocabulary, but really for us to get a nice idea of your interpretation of the word. So, kaise bole seed Hindustani mein? How do you say seed in Hindustani? Now, Vinay, we had answers bouncing from Bia to beach, Bia beach. Chandra Butler seemed to be really excited to share her response, and she simply put, Bia. And I remember, she said, my parents and my grandparents sowing and preparing for the planting of rice. So it was a word that she was accustomed to, Bia. But some were accustomed hearing Bia, and they use the word Bia, and others were more familiar with beach. So here's the thing: how is beer? Does that seem to be more common among the older generation?
Yeah, so it seems like based on the responses, that bia as a Hindustani word for seed was more commonly used by the elder people, and it seems to be slightly more associated with Bhojpuri. However, bij, used in both, seems to lean more towards the standard Hindi and known by a lot of younger people. One thing that we did want to note, however, is that in places like Fiji and Suriname, where the languages are still spoken regularly in daily conversation, some people from Fiji and Suriname responded with both bia and beach, which then again just goes to show the diversity of the language and how it's changed over time. But we do find that bia typically is more Bhojpuri and beach is more standard Hindi, but they're both used synonymously now by a lot of people.
And is it that beach because we are more exposed to Hindi, what we see on television, what we read, what we hear in songs, or even among those who speak Hindi? That could also be a reason why we're more exposed to beach.
Yes, definitely. There's definitely that, influence of the Hindi there. And then you'll also find in Fiji and Suriname that you have an influence of Awadhi, so other, languages besides Bhojpuri. So that could be another factor.
Interestingly, though, someone texted in Ghusli, which technically is a seed.
Yeah, so somebody did mention Gusli, and we know that to be more specific to a mango seed. So if you're just referring to seed in general, you wouldn't use Gusli, you would use that more for mango seed.
But is it the mango seed when you have finished eating whatever remains. That seed is the, or if you cutting up mango for chow, for example, that seed that remains, that is what is called the kusli.
Yeah, so that specific C that you have remaining, that's the ghusli. So if you were to think, a lot of people know that the Hindustani word for mango is am. Instead of saying am ke bia, for example, which is literally mango seed, ghusli is more specific to the mango seed itself. So it's more of a direct word.
All right, so this took us into rope, not rupee, but rope. And everybody got this right on the radio side as well as online. Rope to plant. But I learned a new word, Bowawe, and I saw some comments feature that word Bowawe. So Vinay, can you help us understand rope and Bowawe? Are they synonyms? Can we use them in the same context, or you have a slight contextual change?
So it does seem that nowadays some people might use it synonymously. However, we know that language is obviously very complicated and diverse. So in the way that you have in the English language words like plant and sow, we know you might, plant an actual flower plant or you might sow some seeds. There's that distinction as well between rope and bowawe or bowe as found in some dialects. And so we found that bowawe or bowe seems to be more generally used for seeds and being referenced as to sow, whereas rope seems like a more generalized word for to plant. So you could you could rope dan or plant rice, or you could bowe seeds. You could bowe bia, bowe beach. So bowe has more to do with to sow, and rope has more to do with to plant. Mhm.
Now, I believe that the word was featured in a song that I think most people are familiar with.
Yes, so if you go and take a listen to the song Arya Arya by Sulogam from Suriname, you'll hear in that song Arya Arya Reya Bowaya.
Arya Arya Raya Buayo Bichwa Buayo Chauraya Kiwawa
Which means side by side you're planting amaranth seeds, and so you hear the reference there, bowaya. So you're sowing those seeds. You're sowing the seeds of amaranth side by side.
Well, let's have a little conversation, Vinay. Let's see how we can use the word rupee, for example, in conversation. So let's say that I see my neighbor, Neperosen, in the yard, and she's there in her garden, and she's fixing up her plants and so on. And I want to ask her, what you planting so early? So I know she's preparing to plant. So I want to ask, what are you planting so early? Or as we would say in Trinidad, what you planting so early? Yes.
Yes, if you want to ask someone, what you planting so early, you could say ka ropat ba sabere sabere. Ka ropat ba sabere sabere. So sabere sabere is the Hindustani word for early morning. And as we know, when you repeat something and you say it twice, it adds emphasis. So sabere is the morning, but when you're saying sabere sabere, that means so early in the morning. So ka ropadba sabere sabere. Now, if you wanted to say what are you planting so early in the garden, you could say ka ropadba bagacha me sabere sabere or ka ropadba bagia me sabere sabere, because bagacha or bagia are two Hindustani words for garden.
Yes, and we featured those on Trinidad Bhojpuri. So thank you to those of you who had submitted the translation for Bagacha as well. Someone had mentioned that it had been a while since she heard that word Bagacha, though, when we featured that earlier on. All right, so now you know, if you see a neighbor planting very early morning, you could ask that. Hopefully they understand Bhojpuri. Let's go. So let's say I see some gardeners in a shop. So I go to the shop and I see some of them there. And I want to ask, what are you all planting these days? So I know they're not planting because they're in a shop, but I know they plant. So this is more in a general sense. So how would you ask, what are you planting these days?
Yeah, so what you're planting these days in a more, present tense, general sense, that would be ka ropela ajkal samu mein. Ka ropela ajkal samu mein. And ka ropela means, what you're planting. Ajkal can mean yesterday or tomorrow. Aj means today. So ajkal, the combination means nowadays. And samu means, the time that we're in the present. So ka ropila ajkal samu mein. What are you planting these days?
So I noted ropela and ropatpa. What's the difference?
So ropatba, you're saying, what you're planting, and that's in the present progressive. So it's continuous. But if you're just asking something in a general sense to somebody in the moment, that's when you would say ropela. So ropela is when you're just talking to someone in the present tense generally. Whereas if you're speaking to someone and you're asking what they're doing, present progressive, it's ka ropatba.
All right, so let's flip. Let's work on the response to those questions. So if I wanted to reply as my neighbor and say, I am planting peppers and tomatoes.
Yeah, so I'm planting peppers and tomatoes. We know that peppers is marcha, and we know that for us Trinidadians, tomatoes is damadol. So you could say hum marcha a damadol ropela. Hum marcha a damadol ropela. So I am planting tomatoes and peppers.
So is and.
Yes, is and.
Okay. And if I wanted to say I am going to plant okra and baigan.
Yeah, so you can say we know okra is bhindi, and we know baigan is just baigan. So everybody, that's a free word. Everybody knows that. So if you want to say I am going, that's hum jaila. I am going to plant okra and baigan. Hum jaila bhindi, baigan rope. Hum jaila bhindi, baigan rope. I'm going to plant okra and eggplant.
All right, so now we have a better idea of how the conversation would flow if you were to use those words, the rope, ropela, ropatpa, and of course we're familiar with Hindi and Baigan and Marcha and Damadol. So you put them all together, it all makes so much sense now. So this is wonderful. So we can actually have a full conversation, at least part of a conversation now. Let's go into our Trinidad Bhojpuri phrase or expression. This one was, I think this was simple enough for a lot of people because of the word BHOOK. So, HUMKE BHOOK LAGAT BA. HUMKE BHOOK LAGAT BA. And we have heard LAGAT BA before because we've used that in previous phrases and expressions. So, Vinay, just give us a translation and explain lagat ba.
Yeah, so humke bhook lagat ba means I'm feeling hungry. That's the contextual meaning, and that's how you translate it to English. However, if we want a more direct translation, humke means to me or to us, but in this case, to me. Bhook, hunger, and then lagadba means is feeling. So lagadba is feeling. Now, if I were to say hamke bhook lagalba, that means I am hungry, and the lagalba means is felt. So lagalba is felt, lagatba is feeling. So there's a difference in tense in that case.
So humke bhook lagat ba.
That means I'm feeling
Hungry.
And then if you want to say hamke bhook lagal ba, lagal instead of lagat, that's I am hungry. And so a lot of people were able to get this answer because they heard the word bhook, and they know that bhook means hunger. And if you listen to a couple of chutney songs, and in this case I'm going to reference Danadeya Narayan's popular song Baigan Wale, That song, there's a line in the song where she goes, Jo more mirja ke bhuka lagate hai. And she's saying that when her husband, who she refers to as Mirja, a prince, when he's feeling hungry, she'll bring him bara and kachori to eat. So if you listen to that song again, you'll hear that line, Jo more mirja ke bhuka lagate hai.
जो मोरे मिर्जा के भूखा लगत है जो मोरे मिर्जा के
Well, I think that song, I think this song makes sense now. Well, I don't know. We have a different understanding of the song, but there are some parts we could actually use here in our Bhojpuri feature. Oh, that was refreshing though. Okay, so another Bhojpuri word, JHONKAAWAY. Oh, this is such a sweet word. I really like this word, JHONKAAWAY. And basically, people who understood the meaning said that it was something that they like to do with babies, which was just to, you just toss them and you catch them, and it's like child's play, and it's really cool, and it's really cute. Someone made mention that if you, I think it was Mavis, when you just give the baby a bath, and you just like throw them up and you catch them and they just giggle, and you can see Vinay and I really smiling, so you know that it's really really sweet. I mean, we know some people use words like sky. I mean, it's not like you're really going to fling them up catch them, right? But it's really like play with babies. So JHONKAAWAY. But I was just curious because I wanted to know if we only use this in the context of babies or child play. Like if you could JHONKAAWAY something like, I don't know, you could JHONKAAWAY a pizza dough.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we definitely can use JHONKAAWAY in different contexts. Now, the way that it seems that people know it in our community, it's when JHONKAAWAY the lalana, which is when you throw them up slightly. And again, to emphasize, you do it dire dire, slowly. You're not tossing them into the air. But yes, you can JHONKAAWAY pizza dough, for example. When you throw it up into the air and you catch it, that's JHONKAAWAYing the pizza dough. However, contextually, if it has to do with a baby or a lalan or a lalana, you do it a lot softer, a lot more gentle. So the word JHONKAAWAY, it comes from the stem jhonk or joka. And so, as we mentioned, JHONKAAWAY means to toss or to throw. Whether you're JHONKAAWAYing pizza dough, you're tossing it high into the sky, or you're JHONKAAWAYing the lalana when you toss the baby slightly, not far into the sky. However, JHONKAAWAY as a verb comes from jok or joka, which is a noun, and that means a blast of something, a gust of something, a puff of something. So jok is actually an onomatopoeia. It's the sound of something, jerking or whipping. So for example, you might hear jok jok hilawe. That's when you shake your hip or you just shake, vigorously, or you jerk back and forth. Or if you hear hawaka joka, that's a gust of wind. And there's actually a very popular song from a film that I think a lot of people have seen, Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, with Aishwarya Rai and Ajay Devgan. And the opening line in that song goes...
Was it Ajay Devgan or Salman Khan?
Both of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah. So in the popular movie Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, you'll hear the song Joka Kahawa or Joka Hawaka, and that means a gust of wind. And so the line goes, Joka Hawaka Aaj Bhi Zulfe Udhata Hogana.
झोंका हवा का आज भी जुल्फें उड़ाता होगा ना.
And that means in this gust of wind today, your hair will be blowing in that way. So joka, as you can see in that context, has to do with a gust of something. So it comes from that, and when you add awe to that joka, then you have the verb jokawe, which is to toss something. And so the joke is the sound of that tossing.
Okay, so but it's also something that's brisk. I get the impression that it's like really quick and
Yeah, very quick, very sudden.
Mhm. And we're not going to joke away a newborn. I
Mhm.
don't think anybody would do that.
Yeah.
But yes, we don't joke away to the point where, as Nana made reference, you give the child hustling.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think it's intentional. But that's basically what most people had to say about Chokawi. And they got it. They got it. They figured it out. So it could mean that they too very familiar with that word Chokawi. And our food related word, well, this was submitted by Dr. Visham Pima. So kusume, we usually wrap up with a food related word. Kusume. Um, I confess that I really didn't think this was pure Bhojpuri. What was your take on this, Vinay?
Yeah, so this is a word that I wasn't too familiar with, and it's
Mm-hmm.
based on the comments and Dr. Bimal's input, and we'll include some of that information to follow. He'll kind of talk about the etymology of the word kusume. It seems to be more from a French Creole patois origin. And so, as we know, with words like, bacchanal and flambeau and damadole, a lot of words of patois French Creole origin have made their way into Bhojpuri. And so it seems like this might be one of those words that has those French origins. And so kusume, by definition, means to let something simmer, to let it boil down. And a lot of people did answer with that. However, it does seem to be, rather than of Bhojpuri origin, to be more of a loan word from the local Trinidadian Creole. And we'll let Dr. Bimal explain more and give context to that.
Words like these are often unique to Trinidad Bhojpuri because they would have been loaned from Trinidad Patois. This is one example. Kusume, which means to simmer, comes from the same word kusume from Trinidad Patois, which comes from French consommer, which means to consume. So often we find words like these that Trinidad Bhojpuri speakers will know, but Hindustani speakers elsewhere in the diaspora and even in India might know. This one was a classic example.
All right. Well, we now have a better understanding of the word kusume, but I think everybody in the comment section they went along with simmer or to slow cook something. So they probably have come across that word kusume before. And yes, there are lots of words here in Trinidad that we might think it's of this origin when actually it's not. But that's the purpose of this feature. So we have clear understanding of words, and so we want to thank Dr. Visham Pimal for explaining that one to us. All right, so another fantastic week. It's always a learning opportunity for everybody, myself, everybody included, and we can't do this without your input, everybody. So thank you very much for your contributions and for following this feature. So, Vinay, how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on social media at Cutlass Magazine on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, or feel free to send me a sandesh or a message, cutlasspodcast@gmail.com.
There you go. So once again, thanks a lot for following and keep up with us. We have wonderful words for you this week, and we'll have another weekly recap for you coming up. Until next time, bloopers. We have around bloopers.
Or if you hear, oh, now I'm forgetting the word. Well, let me read it.
All right. Okay. Go.
Yeah. For the word